Hello, everybody. This is Gynarchy Awakening. I decided to make a late night video. This may be broken up into parts, maybe not. It really just depends on how long I go on. I don't exactly know. I wanted to talk about why I have stayed in the Gynarchy community, like why I have decided that this community is my home, why I wouldn't have any other community, and why I've never been able to fully I don't want to use the word assimilate. It's again negative connotation, negative word. I guess I'd say that I've never been able to fully embrace any other community other than this one. I've always felt at home here, and I decided this is the place where I'm going to stay. But why exactly why did that happen? It involves like a long complex history, and there's I'm not going to name any names. I don't do that stuff. Uh, because I don't believe in incitement to violence or rioting or anything like that. But back then, I was I still had problems with violence. I still was exiting a hate group. I was trying to seek support from people who, in all honesty, were not anywhere near supportive enough, and it really hurt. It hurt that there was not people who are willing to take me aside and talk about this stuff and actually try to give me a little bit of guidance. See, that's the ironic thing about these individuals. They like to lecture other people on how they ought to be, how they're not to be, but they don't want to get directly involved. And so I felt there was like this kind of impersonal kind of nature to what it is that they do. And one of the things that I reflected on later, much later, was how I reacted to the writing. Like the things I said should have been called out more. The things I did today when I wake up in the morning, I'm just ashamed of them. And that's because I know I have that side of me that is very angry, that wants to enact violence. But then I have another side that says you need to maintain your balance. You need to be there for your family, particularly, you know, your mother and your sister, and at the time, my grandmother. And that's kind of, and what they did was they were encouraging the worst behavior. They were fostering the violence. And the irony, of course, is later on when other people, other groups start being violent and they start rationalizing it, they think arguments are good enough. They think, oh, well, that's just a false equivalence. It's trying to overthrow the government. It's not the same thing as burning businesses and cities to the ground. And I think that they kind of missed the point. Like these individuals have quite literally missed the point because who gets to decide what's more valuable, a government or your business, right? What's more personal to you as a human being? Are and so when you're saying stuff like, well, these aren't the same things, who are you to decide what's the same thing in somebody's head? Like, if somebody wants to believe that the government or government involvement that deserves the same level of attention as somebody's home or business being burned to the ground, I mean, you can try to talk them out of it, but it's not really practical now, is it? And I wasn't really, I was like at that stage where I was still trying to find a place to belong while attempting to escape from a violent hate group, like trying to transition myself out of it, trying to move away from them. And ironically, these individuals who call themselves, and I'm not saying radical feminists, there's a difference. I'm talking about these feminists that have a tendency to interact with other people who regularly engage in violence and practice violence. It's incorporated into their activism. And I look back on it and I don't like the way I behaved. I don't like the way I acted. And I could have used more accountability for what had happened. But I didn't get that. And part of the problem is because I was trying to fit in with that group, because I thought that they were better than the one I was leaving. Because they were talking about killing lawyers and all sorts of other fucked up stuff. But then this group is celebrating people's property being burned to the ground. Like, if you've ever run a business, you should know how hard it is to actually set one up, construct one, and then, try to make a life for yourself. And for somebody just to come up to you and say something to the effect of, "Oh, well, you just value, property more than human life." Okay. Not only is that absolutely fucked up and totally inappropriate to say to somebody who has lost their business, but once again, and this is the problem with the radical, violent leftists that alienated me from their community. I don't think people know where I stand. I'm an apolitical person. I don't like the far right, and I do not like people on the far left. I try to center myself as much as I can. I'm not saying that the party policies are inherently better or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm referring to their behavior. I'm referring to the ways that they behave. Uh, so in this case, they just totally, again, miss the point. Don't get it. Who decides what life is? Hmm? What is a life, right? Because you talk about okay, losing a life. Well, have you ever heard of the philosophy of sometimes a long life isn't necessarily a good one? Have you also thought about another philosophy, which is sometimes a life is simply the sum of what you do or don't do with it? So, what about, I mean, let's say somebody took 5 to 10 years to build that business. Let's say it's a woman, for the sake of argument. Let's say it's a woman who founded that business, who wanted to employ other women, who wanted to create a space for them where they could feel safe, where they wouldn't have to worry about stuff, or something like that, right? Like, or maybe you are trying to employ other people who are being targeted in their community, or people who they really need a second chance to turn their life around, whatever it is. And you've been working on this for 8 to 10 years, right? Like, you're just a good person. You're just trying to do the right thing. But because of a political situation, or because of something that happened involving two individuals, again, it didn't concern like two individuals, because of how people connected to that situation, you lose your business. You not only lose that, but you lose your ability to employ people and to help other human beings. I hate this reductionism bullshit that comes from the far left. This whole, well, property versus life thing. What is a life? What does it mean to live? What does it mean to live a meaningful life? And why do people have to agree with your notion of what a meaningful life is? I would love to know an answer to that fucking question. Because apparently, according to them, all that matters is that people live, not how they live. And I think it's more disturbing that these are the same individuals that, claim that they want the best for minorities, right? They want the best for marginalized people, or for people who have those issues. Well, if you want the best for them, well, what happens if, as a result of the rioting, some of the people who are employing those individuals and giving them jobs, what happens when they lose the power to do that? Are we still doing good then? This is again uh, why I eventually became alienated by them, is because there is a lot of cognitive dissonance that is happening within those spaces and the people in those spaces, right? Is they don't want to have a dialogue with the other people in their community. They don't even think about the consequences of what they're encouraging. I was not a good person back then. I'm still struggling to be a better man today. But when you're fanning the flames of hatred, literally, you're going to start unleashing people's demons, and that's not good for anybody. And that's why when I saw that, I was like, okay, I can't be part of this anymore. I had like a awakening moment in my own way. Late years later, where when I finally got away from them long enough to look back, I was like, you know what? They were not a good thing for me. They were not good for me. They were not good for my life. These people were dangerous because had a fundamental misunderstanding of their opposition. They had a fundamental misunderstanding of everything that they were presenting. Like they were trying to trap everything that was happening, that entire context that summer within the prism of property versus human life, failing to realize that for many people, their business is their life. Their business is the way that they try to connect with their community and to build and help their community. So to try to reduce everything to, well, it's just ownership. Like they try to treat a business as if it were just a car, or if it were just some kind of like PlayStation game, some kind of item that you take with you, uh, and you can just it's just you can just get it back anytime you want. Really, anyone who's ever built a business would probably be able to tell you that you can't just go back to it. Like it's not just a place to work. It's a place to live. It's a place where you socialize, you interact with people. Like there's so many complex things that go on in the life of a small business owner or just a business person in general. But to reduce everything to it's just property. That's it? It's just property? What? As for the whole valuing human life thing, this is another problem, again, that this community has and how full of shit they are. Because they'll talk about how, they'll criticize other people and say, they just value property over human life. But then they will advocate for the destruction of human lives. They'll even cheerlead it. They'll gloss over the violence that happens within people in their own community, especially the violence that is the most abhorrent and vicious. They will not hold those people accountable for the shit that they say. I know because I was looking for it for years. Once I finally got some time away from those, like where is CBN saying it? Not CBN, what is it? CNN saying it. MSNBC. Where are they fucking saying this? Are they going to ever call out that community for doing it? They never did. And so I can't, like, in order to live my life, I have to try to be as consistent as I can in whatever it is that I do, because I have to maintain a balance in order to live, in my opinion, a meaningful life. So whenever they do this reductionist bullshit of property versus human life, well, they don't even think that all life is precious in the first fucking place. So it's really funny hearing people say, oh, well, they should just value human life more than property, right? But then they are okay, apparently, I've never heard them denounce it, of a woman getting headbutted in Auckland, New Zealand, having her skull cracked, because it's all for the greater good. This is, by the way, something that uh, far right terrorists have something in common with the violent far leftists in this country. They both believe that the ends justify the means. They just go about things in different ways. They have different tactics and different strategies that they employ. But ultimately, it's the same shit. And so I always felt this feeling of a general sense of unsafety with them. I always felt at any time that I always felt like I had to self-censor. I felt like I was always on eggshells around these individuals. I was concerned that if I ever seriously criticized them, that I would just end up being put into the other camp. And that was because I had failed to realize then what I know now, which is I have a specific nature that does not allow me to coincide with these types of communities. Because part of me was trying to wake up to the fact, and eventually did wake up to the fact, that I am totally incompatible with them. Because I don't believe the ends justify the means. And the reason why I don't believe that is because if you believe it, and if your opponent believes it, then that means that there is no moral limit. And once it goes into conflict, like violence can take you anywhere. So that's the problem with the ends justifies the means argument. The problem with that is there's always going to be some other person who thinks who has the same exact ideology that you do. This is going to be going to a part two.